Before roller coasters became steel giants, they were wooden landmarks. They stood over beaches, lakes, gardens, and old amusement parks built in a time when the industry was still figuring out what a thrill ride could be. Most of them were not built with a century in mind. They were built to draw crowds, define a park, and give riders a reason to come back. Most disappeared. A few found a way to keep running. Some were rebuilt after disaster, some were saved from demolition. Some were renamed, expanded, redesigned, and carried into new eras by the park that refused to let them go. This is the history of the oldest operating wooden roller coasters of the world. The Giant Dipper opened at Belmont Park in San Diego on July 4th, 1925, when the park was still known as Mission Beach Amusement Center. It was part of a larger effort to turn Mission Beach into a major seaside destination, backed by a developer, John D. Spreckles. His projects helped shape San Diego's early coastal amusement scene. The coaster was designed by Frank Pryor and Frederick Church, two names tied closely to California's golden age of wooden coaster design. Like many seaside coasters of the 1920s, the Giant Dipper was not just an attraction. It was architecture with motion, a wooden signal that told people the beach had become a place for spectacle. For decades, the ride helped define Belmont Park, but its lowest point came long after its opening day. By the 1970s, the park had fallen into decline, and the Giant Dipper was no longer seen by everyone as a treasure. It had deteriorated badly enough that demolition became a real possibility. That decline became the turning point in its history. The Giant Dipper did not survive because time protected it. It survived because people intervened. A new company, the San Diego Coaster Company, was formed to restore and operate the ride, bringing it back from the brink rather than letting another seaside wooden coaster vanish. That restoration changed the meaning of the ride. It was no longer only a 1920s thrill machine. It became evidence that an old coaster could still have a future if a community saw history inside of the structure. Today, Belmont's Giant Dipper stands as one of the last surviving seaside wooden coasters of its era, not because it avoided decline, but because it came back from it. One year before Belmont's Giant Dipper, the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk opened its own Giant Dipper on May 17, 1924. It replaced an earlier scenic railway and quickly became the centerpiece of the boardwalk's identity. The ride was built during the final stretch of the Great Wooden Coaster Boom, when America's amusement parks were racing to create bigger, faster, and more memorable rides. Santa Cruz did not just build a coaster, it built a landmark. The boardwalk was already tied to the beach, the pier, and the rhythm of California summers. The Giant Dipper gave that setting a permanent silhouette. Its red and white structure became part of the way people remembered Santa Cruz. Long before social media thumbnails and park branding campaigns, this coaster was doing the work of an icon. Its survival also says something about how parks choose their identity. Many wooden coasters from the 1920s disappeared when they aged out of fashion or became expensive to maintain. Santa Cruz kept investing in the Giant Dipper, treating it less like a replaceable ride and more like a defining feature of the park. More than 66 million riders have experienced it since its opening, according to the boardwalk's official ride history. That number is not just a ridership milestone. It is evidence of a ride becoming a shared inheritance. A coaster built in the 1920s stayed relevant because each generation gave it to the next. By the time newer rides began rising around it, the Giant Dipper had already earned what every attraction hopes to become, a permanent part of the park's identity. Thunderbolt at Kennywood began in 1924 as a wooden coaster called Pippin. That original ride belonged to the early golden age of wooden coaster design, when parks were learning how to use natural landforms to make rides feel bigger and more dramatic than their height alone. Kennywood was the perfect setting for that kind of ride. The park sits on terrain that allowed designers to use ravines and elevation changes as part of the experience. Although Pippin was not simply built on the land, it used the land. That became one of Kennywood's historical signatures. In 1968, the Pippin was transformed into Thunderbolt. This was not a simple name change. It was a major redesign led by Andy Vittel, with a new track and more intense layout built around portions of the older ride. The result was a coaster with 2 lives. It's not preserved in the way a museum object is preserved. It is preserved through transformation. The ride carries 1924 inside of 1968. The older ravine sections connect it to the wooden coaster boom, while the redesigned layout reflects a later amusement era that wanted a stronger pacing and more forceful thrills. That kind of evolution is easy to overlook, but it is central to roller coaster history. Parks have always had to decide what to save, what to change, and what to rebuild. Thunderbolt survived because Kennywood found a way to let an older ride become something new without completely erasing where it came from. Its history is not a straight line. It is rebuilt, a reinvention, and a reminder that sometimes the future of a ride begins inside the bones of the past. Thunderhawk opened at Dorney Park in 1924 under the name The Coaster. That simple name came from a time when the ride type itself was still powerful enough to sell the experience. A park did not need to explain the attraction with lore, branding, or dramatic backstories. A wooden coaster was the spectacle. The ride was designed by Herbert P. Schmeck of Philadelphia Toboggan Company, one of the most important forces in early 20th century coaster design. That connection places Thunderhawk directly inside the era when wooden coaster design was becoming more refined, more repeatable, and more central to amusement park identity. Originally, Thunderhawk followed a more traditional out-and-back layout. In 1930, the ride was reconfigured with a figure-8 character it still carries today, giving it more twisting movement and a stronger sense of variety. The 1930 redesign shows the industry still learning in real time. Early coasters had proven that drops in speed could draw crowds, but parks wanted rides that felt more dynamic. A figure-8 layout added crossing motion, turns, and visual complexity. It made the coaster feel less like a trip out and back and more like a ride with movement wrapped around itself. Over the decades, Thunderhawk was renamed, repainted, rebuilt in sections, and modernized. That is not a weakness in its history. That is why it still exists. Wooden coasters age differently from steel rides. They survive through constant care, track work, structural repairs, train updates, paint, inspections, and seasonal rebuilding. Thunderhawk's century-long life is not one uninterrupted object from 1924. It is a century of decisions to keep the ride alive. That makes Thunderhawk one of the clearest examples of what a historic coaster preservation really looks like. Not a frozen ride in time, but one maintained carefully enough to keep carrying new generations. The Big Dipper opened at Blackpool Pleasure Beach on August 23, 1923, during the rise of Britain's seaside amusement culture. Blackpool was already one of the country's major resort towns, and Pleasure Beach was becoming a place where entertainment, spectacle, and mechanical thrills could exist together on a massive scale. A wooden coaster fit that world perfectly. It gave the park height, it gave the promenade movement, it gave visitors something they could see before they rode it. The Big Dipper became one of those spectacles. Its history also shows how old wooden coasters often survive by changing. The ride was expanded in the 1930s, allowing it to grow with the park rather than remaining locked in its earlier form. Blackpool Pleasure Beach recognizes the Big Dipper as one of its historic rides and celebrated its centennial in 2023. That matters because historic rides are sometimes misunderstood. Survival does not mean every beam remains untouched from opening day. A wooden coaster is almost never a single unchanged artifact. It is a living structure, repaired and adjusted across generations. The Big Dipper endured because it remained useful to the park's identity. As Pleasure Beach added larger, newer, and more technologically advanced rides, the Big Dipper continued to represent an older layer of the park's history. It stands for the moment when wooden coasters helped seaside parks become destinations, when a ride could rise into the skyline, making an amusement park feel permanent. As Blackpool Pleasure Beach changed around it, the Big Dipper kept giving the park a visible link to the seaside coaster boom that helped build its identity. Lagoon Amusement Park's roller coaster opened in 1921 in Farmington, Utah. Its name is almost shockingly simple now, but that simplicity belongs to the era. Before every ride needed a brand, a backstory, and a cinematic identity, a park would call its wooden coaster exactly what it was. Roller coaster became one of Lagoon's defining attractions as the park grew through the 20th century. But its most important historical moment came in 1953, when a fire destroyed much of the park and damaged the coaster. Lagoon's own history notes that half of the roller coaster was burned in the disaster. That could have ended the ride. Instead, the roller coaster was rebuilt. The burned portions were reconstructed in 1954, and the coaster continued forward. Lagoon's ride page notes that the front of the coaster was destroyed in the fire, rebuilt the following year, and that sections are rebuilt year by year. That history gives the ride a different kind of importance. Roller coaster is not simply old because it avoided disaster. It's old because it survived one. The rebuild also reflects a larger truth about amusement parks. They are fragile places. Fire, weather, economics, changing tastes, and land value have erased countless historic rides. Lagoon chose to bring its coaster back, and that choice allowed a 1921 attraction to keep growing with the park. Today, roller coaster is not the newest or the most extreme ride at Lagoon. It does not need to be. Its role is older and deeper than that. It became proof that part of Lagoon's past was still worth rebuilding. Kennywood's Jack Rabbit opened in 1920 and remains one of the most important terrain coasters in the world. Designed and built by John Miller on a natural ravine, the ride used the valley's landscape to create a drop larger and more dramatic than the structure alone would suggest. That use of terrain is the reason Jack Rabbit still matters historically. Early coaster designers did not always have materials, technology, or budgets that modern parks use to create massive structures. What they did have was land, gravity, and ingenuity. Jack Rabbit turned the ground itself into part of the ride. Its signature moment is the double dip, a rare feature that Kennywood still identifies as the ride's defining element. The double dip is not just a fun detail. It is a piece of coaster design history. It shows how one carefully placed element can define an entire attraction. Long before modern rides advertised launches, inversions, beyond vertical drops, or record-breaking airtime, Jack Rabbit had one moment people remembered by instinct. That was enough to give the ride a legacy. Kennywood's history also matters here. The park became known for classic rides that use its terrain and preserve older amusement traditions. Jack Rabbit helped establish that classic identity. It gave the park a coaster that felt inseparable from the land on which it was built. It was often the first real roller coaster, the family ride with one moment that felt bigger than expected. A 1920 engineering decision became something riders could pass across a century. The Jack Rabbit at Seabreeze near Lake Ontario opened in 1920 and was designed by John A. Miller and Harry C. Baker. Seabreeze identifies it as the oldest operating roller coaster in America, with a modified out and back layout, a 75-foot drop, and a tunnel. Its historical importance comes from timing. By 1920, roller coasters were moving away from the older scenic railway tradition and towards faster, more focused thrill machines. Jack Rabbit reflects that shift. It kept the wooden structure and the gravity-driven movement of earlier rides, but the experience became sharper. Climb, drop, hills, tunnel, return. That structure helped define what riders expected from a coaster. A good coaster needed rhythm. It needed a beginning, a release, and a finish strong enough to stay in memory. Jack Rabbit delivered that in a compact layout, providing that a coaster need not be enormous to feel complete. Seabreeze itself is part of the story. Founded in the late 19th century, the park grew as a regional amusement destination near Lake Ontario. The Jack Rabbit became one of its anchors, a ride old enough to connect the park's early amusement history to its modern identity. The ride's survival is also a reminder that historic coasters do not only live at the largest parks. Some of the most important amusement park histories are preserved in regional parks that kept operating, maintaining, and welcoming families back. That is what gives Seabreeze's Jack Rabbit its weight. It's not only the oldest operating wooden roller coaster in America, but proof that national amusement history can survive inside of a local park, one train at a time. Rutschebanen opened at Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen on June 12, 1914. ACE identifies it as the oldest operating roller coaster in Europe and the third oldest in the world. Its importance is not only age. Rutschebanen belongs to the scenic railway tradition, when coasters were simply tied to the atmosphere and setting. Tivoli describes it as a classic wooden coaster that has thrilled visitors since 1914, and the ride remains wrapped in its mountain-themed environment. That mountain setting is essential to its history. Before modern theme parks built entire lands around storytelling, rides like Rutschebanen were already proving that the scenery could change the meaning of motion. The coaster did not simply move riders through the track, it moved them through a place. That idea would become one of the foundations of themed entertainment. Tivoli Gardens was already one of Europe's greatest amusement spaces. It blended gardens, performances, food, music, and rides into a carefully designed atmosphere. Rutschebanen fit into that world because it was not just a thrill structure, it was part of the park's scenery, rhythm, and identity. Its continued operation makes it a rare living example of a style that has nearly disappeared. Many scenic railways were removed as parks chased newer, faster, and more compact coaster designs. Rutschebanen kept alive an older idea that modern theme parks would later build on. A roller coaster could be more than a machine. It could be a setting in motion. The Great Scenic Railway opened at Luna Park, Melbourne on December 13, 1912. Guinness World Records identifies it as the oldest continuously operating roller coaster in the world, and Luna Park describes it as the world's oldest continually operating roller coaster. It stretches almost 1 kilometer around the edge of Luna Park, with 967 meters of wooden track shaping the park rather than simply sitting inside of it. That layout matters historically. The Great Scenic Railway came from a time when roller coasters were still closely connected to the scenic railway tradition. Instead of being built only around maximum force or speed, the ride framed the park, moved around it, and gave riders views of the world beyond the track. It made the coaster part of the park's architecture. Its most remarkable feature is still the brakesman. Luna Park notes that the ride is operated with a standing brakesman aboard the train, a rare surviving method from the earliest period of roller coaster operation. That detail is not trivia. It is a surviving piece of how roller coasters worked before the industry became automated and standardized. The brakesman was part operator, part safety system, and part performer, physically riding the train as gravity did its work. The Great Scenic Railway is the oldest ride in this countdown because it still carries that early world in motion. The timber, the views, the manual control, the park wrapped around the track, the sense that the coaster was not separate from the amusement park, but one of the things that gave the park its shape. More than a century later, it still runs along the edge of Luna Park, not as a replica, as the real thing. When the story reaches Luna Park, Melbourne, the countdown has moved from 1925 back to 1912, but age alone did not make these rides important. Generations did. Children rode them when the amusement park industry was still young, then returned years later with their own families. The same stations, lift hills, drops, and wooden tracks kept carrying new riders until these coasters became more than attractions. They became landmarks, traditions, and reasons families came back to the same parks again and again. That is what helped shape the amusement park industry. Long before steel record breakers, launch systems, and immersive themed lands, these wooden coasters proved that a great ride could live beyond the moment it ended. It could become part of the park's identity, part of a family's memory, and part of the reason one generation brought the next. More than a century later, their trains are still leaving the station, carrying new riders over old tracks and keeping the beginning of the amusement park industry alive. Most wooden roller coasters from that first great coaster age have vanished, but a few, they never disappeared.